I think there's a lot of things you can say about Attack on Titan, both good or bad. I think one thing that you can say, if you can bear with the gore and violence and stuff, is that it is very, very watchable. Every episode is a constant, like, just thrill ride. You're on the edge of your seat. You're wondering what's going to happen next. At the end of every episode, there's a cliffhanger. There's twists and turns. It is a very exciting, stimulating show. And that's a huge part in its favor, because the worst thing any piece of media can do is not to be bad, but to be boring. And by boring, I don't mean slow or self-reflexive or dialogue heavy. I just mean unwatchable, uninteresting, nothing to really make you continue on along with the story. And a lot of the time, I will give better reviews to things that I feel are watchable, that do have a decent flow to them, that I kind of, I guess I feel to a certain extent, if I sit down and watch something, even if maybe it's not that great, but I can just sit down and just watch it and enjoy it, and I just kind of want to keep going through it, that's probably a sign that it's doing something right. And I mean, ideally, it has both things. It's both kind of artistic, it has some good themes, it has good characters, it has good writing, but it also is watchable. I think Attack on Titan mostly achieves that, which I think is why it's so highly regarded. But like I said, even if I think the pacing is kind of questionable at points in this show, there's not really any point where I've just said, I'm bored. That being said, before we get into the plot, let's just talk about the pacing a bit. Attack on Titan has kind of weird pacing. I'm not saying it's bad or anything, or this is necessarily a criticism. More of kind of an observation, I guess you could say. It seems like the show goes between nothing happening and everything happening. There's kind of this weird segregation between the, like, kind of current plot arc, which is in a very kind of micro tactical sense, and the overall plot. And sometimes one of them is just completely stalled and the other one moves, and sometimes the other one completely moves and the other one's stalled. And sometimes one of them just goes really quick and just a bunch of stuff happens. I noticed, particularly towards the end of this season, and I started watching season 3, so a lot of stuff in season 3, they just kind of say really important information in passing. It's like, oh yeah, we're the people who are actually these other Titans, and it's just kind of said in the background. They dropped Levi's last name in the background. They dropped that, like, just a lot of stuff like that. You can barely even hear it because it's just kind of said semi-off screen. And it's kind of weird. Like, as I said, the pacing's kind of odd. Like, when you get to the royal government arc, like, that whole thing is extremely plot significant, but it gets resolved in, like, 3 episodes, whereas this whole season is only a couple of different battles. So once again, I'm not really saying that as a criticism or that it's, like, something bad. It's just something kind of weird about it that I have really noticed. I think part of it comes down to the fact that this is very much a military show, and it is an actual military show. So a lot of it is about the planning and execution of operations and kind of the on-the-ground tactics, the on-the-ground equipment, the on-the-ground training. Like, there's a lot of stuff that has military aspects to it, but oftentimes those are like some other genre with military aspects, or their slice of life with military aspects. Maybe something like some of the Gundam series, or their dramas with military aspects. This show is very much focused on the military. The closest thing that I've read to this is maybe the Rogue Squadron books, which they have, like, some character stuff, but a lot of it is just very much focused on the capabilities of the X-Wing, the tactics of the squad, how they actually fight against opponents. And once again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of refreshing to see someone do something a little different. But it is very much kind of unusual, especially for something that became this popular. And I find season 2 is kind of weird, because I don't know if it was rushed out or whatever, because season 1 was such a success, and then they just needed to get season 2 out. Like, it's really short. I think it's half the length of season 1. Because season 1 was 25 episodes, and then season 2 was 12 episodes. So it's less than half the length of season 1. And the plot moved really slowly relative to everything that happened in season one. So it does feel like a half season, or it does almost feel like an epilogue to season one, more than kind of having its own identity, which isn't really a problem. It's just kind of weird watching it because when I got through it, I'm like, that's it. It was good. I enjoyed it, but that kind of seems weird if that was supposed to be part two to the story. It felt like part 2.5, 1.5 or something, more than a season that really stood on its own. And I started watching part one, and once again, it's a half season, but it seems to have its more identity more, and a lot more seems to have happened. But yeah, I'm sorry if this makes it sound like I'm complaining. It's just kind of weird. It's more an observation than anything. I mean, at the end of the day, I watched the whole season in like a couple days, and it was like the equivalent of a page turner. So I'm not saying it's bad or anything. It's just kind of weird and unusual. So the plot to season two is kind of weird, to be honest. Basically, there's a incursion by Titans within the second walls. We're introduced to the Beast Titan, which seems to maintain its full human intelligence. The other shifters maintain most of their human intelligence, but they seem to be at least partially overwhelmed by the Titan instincts. Whereas the Beast Titan seems to maintain it fully, and he can talk, which is something none of the other Titans we've seen so far can do. It's clear pretty early on in the season that Erwin has figured out that the other Titans, the Colossal Titan, the Armored Titan, and if there's any others, are probably members of the Cadet Corps and are infiltrated somewhere within the Scouts, mainly because of the events of season one, where someone had to be the one who tipped off the female Titan as to where Eren was and what their plans were. So he divides the likely candidates into different groups and sends them off. And then everything, as with anything that the scouts do, it goes completely foobar. There's an attack of Titans within the second wall. There's no known breach in the first wall, which I think is setting up for the fact that Titans are transformed humans, which is pretty obvious. I don't even really know if that's a spoiler. I don't really know where else they would come from. They look like humans. You have people who can transform into Titans from human form. So, yeah, I'm going to say that that was kind of to be expected. And we find out that there's actually more shifters than we originally thought. There's not only the Armored Titan and the Colossal Titan, but there's Ymir, who's the Jaw Titan. And, well, then there's Eren, who has the Attack Titan and the Founding Titan within him, which is kind of revealed later in this. And then obviously there was the female Titan and Annie. So there was a lot of infiltrators, a lot of subversives from the outside. The thing about Annie though is I don't know if she ever actually dies. She's just stuck in a crystal waiting to emerge as a beautiful butterfly. And I don't know if she ever comes out of her crystal. So she might be one of the few characters who actually survives the series, which is pretty funny because she's the first of the I think 9 Titans to actually get beaten. But I digress. This season seems very much, even more so than the others, to kind of be focused on tactical stuff and just characters getting a lot of screen time. Hanji has established herself, in my opinion, as best girl. I love her character, like how she can go from serious to mad scientist mode, from kind of badass commander to being like really kind of nice and supportive. I like her character design a lot. Actually, it's interesting. The first time I saw her, I did a double take, and I'm like, is that Sasha? Or is that like Sasha's older sister? They look extremely similar in a lot of ways. And I mean, she does look like Sasha's older sister. But it was really nice to see her commanding half of the scouts and doing, generally speaking, a pretty good job. I like intelligence-based heroes. I like heroes who are... Their strength comes from their ability to plan or their ability to invent or do other stuff, rather than just kind of brute force their way through it. Because, I mean, you have guys like Captain Levi, who's a stone cold badass, but it is nice to have characters like Armin or Hanji who are really good at coming up with these 4D chess plans and using those. And that brings us to another point that I forgot to mention in part one. trust the plan is said so many times in this show. It's more than like a poll thread on QAnon. Like the half of season 1 is literally Aaron learning to trust the plan. Because they're running away from the Titans, and Aaron's like, I'm going to transform and fight. And then Levi and I think her name's Petra is like, trust the plan. You got to trust the plan, man. Just trust the plan, Aaron. It's going to work out. Erwin has a plan. The thing is, you should never trust Erwin's plans. Up until season 3, I can't really think of any of his plans that have succeeded. The whole, like, great ranging equivalent beyond the wall was a total disaster. I guess it revealed that there was additional infiltrators, but they already kind of knew that because the other 2 Titans died. Like, his big master plan to capture the female Titan was a complete disaster. It didn't, like, achieve anything. He just got a whole bunch of people killed. And towards the end of this season, we have another big-brained Erwin plan where he's like, we're just going to lead this army of Titans towards the armored Titan, and that's going to somehow help us. And he winds up getting like half of the scouts killed again. And this just kind of seems to be a reoccurring thing where like Hanji's plans work. Also, his plan to divide the people in half didn't wind up. I mean, I guess it revealed the traitors, but it also led to a shit show. So it just seems to me like Erwin's plans never really seemed to work up until his other royal government arc, but Armin's plans always seem to work. So, like, if you're under the command of Erwin, just don't believe anything he says, because he's gonna get you killed. He's he's an extremely reckless commander of a suicidal regiment with a high casualty rate. That is not a good combination. But it's just, like I said, the show is just full of people saying, trust the plan. To quote America First, the earth is flat, patriots are in control, trust the plan. But yeah, like I said, most of the characters got some time to shine. In particular, like I said, it was nice that Hanji got some time. Armin didn't get quite as much time. It was nice that Sasha got some time, because she's one of my favorite characters. It's good to have someone who's mostly there for comic relief. And she's a good candidate for that. Now, while I can't really talk about this on YouTube for obvious reasons, we discover that Krista, who didn't really get much screen time in the previous season, but who looks... It's weird because she looks almost identical to Armin, to the point where Armin is able to successfully pretend to be her by wearing a dress, but there's no actual relationship between them, which seems like kind of a missed opportunity. But yeah, so it turns out that Historia is a natural aristocrat in both senses of the term. She's actually the daughter of some noble. I forget, sorry, spoiler. I forget if it's revealed in this one that she's the actual heir to the throne of once again, I can't really talk about it on YouTube, but her relationship with the Emir is super duper cringe. It's the worst part of this season. It's like I said, I can't talk about it. You know why I can't stand it. It's just kind of annoying how they have to inject it into a show that's otherwise pretty based, but I mean, I guess it's just a Japanese thing. Maybe it's one of those things where they're both completely fucked from their past, so that's what they kind of turn to. I find it interesting. I thought it was well played how they handled Ymir's past, because she was the head of this cult, but they're very clear about not mentioning where this cult is located. They're also very clear about not mentioning who the various infiltrators are actually working for. So you don't know, is it some other faction within the walls? Is it for the Titans directly? Is there some kind of nefarious outside force? So I like that they introduced it, but they kind of keep you guessing throughout. And we get a lot of good dialogue scenes with the infiltrators and that sort of thing. We have a lot of Aaron spurging out and being an edgelord, which is kind of his role in this show. Overall, though, I say it's a good season. I kind of think that's maybe season 2 and season 3 part 1 should have just been combined into one season. It's kind of awkward the way it is. It doesn't really undermine it or anything. It's just kind of a bit odd. But yeah, I liked Attack on Titan Season 2. I'm looking forward to finishing 3.1 and then moving on to, I think 4's out now. I think dubbed 4 is out, actually, so I could probably finish off this series in the foreseeable future. So overall, Season 2 gets 2 thumbs up. Good show. Looking forward to the rest of it.